All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. There we go. What? Go ahead and get started with prayer requests. What prayer requests do we have today? All right, all good in the neighborhood. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started with a prayer, and then we'll get into our Bible class this morning. Let's pray. Dear God, we thank you for this opportunity to be here. We thank you for the opportunity to study your word. We're so grateful that you've given us so much communication that we can look at, that we can see your will and see the guidelines that you've given us and instructions so that we can know how to navigate through this life and through this world that can be very difficult for us at times. God, we pray that as we go to your word that we can do so in submission to you, with respect for what it is and with respect for you and the things that you've communicated to us. Help us to realize that you are so much wiser than we could ever be, and your knowledge is so far above the knowledge that we have or that the world possesses. God, we want to pray just for all of those people in our congregation that are facing different struggles and different tribulation in their life. Just help them, encourage them as they go through those things, and just give them strength and comfort as they deal with those. God, we thank you for caring for us. We thank you for hearing our prayers, but we thank you most of all for Jesus. It's in his name we pray. Amen. This is a little echoey, Joe. If we could just turn it down just a little bit. Unless that's just me, but it's kind of bothering me a little bit. Okay. We're in Proverbs chapter 10. If you have your Bibles, Proverbs is kind of in the middle of the Bible. If you go to Psalms, it's right after that. But we're in Proverbs chapter 10. If you guys remember, maybe a little bit more, Joe. A little bit. All right. Maybe. Proverbs chapter... Nope, it's still there. Just a... All right, how's this? Is that a little bit better? Okay. Proverbs chapter 10. Thank you, Joe. Starting in verse 4. We've been in Proverbs, the first 9 chapters of the book are an introduction to Proverbs, talking about the importance of wisdom, the significance of wisdom, why wisdom is something that we should pursue and chase after, why it's something that's worth spending time on. You know, out of all the things that we can chase after in life, why should wisdom be one of them? So Solomon's just really been giving kind of the groundwork for why wisdom's important. And then chapter 10 is where the Proverbs of Solomon begin, where he's actually giving these short, wise statements that the book of Proverbs is so famous for. Last week we went through the first 3 verses, so this week we're going to pick up in verse 4. He says, "Poor is he who works with a negligent hand, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. He who gathers in summer is a son who acts wisely, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who acts shamefully." So, you know, when we talked about Solomon in his address to the readers, he addresses his sons, and he addresses it as a father addresses his children. If you guys know your dads, they don't just give you spiritual advice. Now, hopefully your dads do give you spiritual advice. Hopefully there's someone that can be like a spiritual mentor to you and give you advice and all those different things. But a dad's job is to give all sorts of advice, not just spiritual advice. Your dad will teach you how to change the tire on the car. He'll teach you dating advice and marriage advice, and all sorts of things that he teaches you are kind of encompassed in that role of father, and parents don't just teach their kids about God and things like that. Well, here's a really good example where Solomon is not just giving spiritual advice, but he's also giving practical life advice to his children about how they're to interact and how they're to behave in the workplace. He says, "Poor is he who works with a negligent hand, but the hand of the diligent makes rich." One thing, you know, there's lots of situations that are outside of our financial control. There's a lot of things that happen that we don't have say over. But what is one thing financially that we can control? What's the one thing I can control financially? I mean, yeah, you're spending. I guess there's more than one. Goodness, that's the right answer. Yeah, you can control your spending if you're spending extravagantly on things you don't really need. Yeah, for sure.
Think about it. Do I need it or want it?
Right. Absolutely. How much things cost? Absolutely. Man, I asked a bad question because there was lots of good answers, and I was thinking of one. The one thing you can control, of many things that you can control apparently, is your work ethic, right? I can't control lots of things. I can't control how much the government's going to tax me, for example. I can't control the cost of gasoline. I can't control, the housing market and things like that. But one thing that I can control is my work ethic. And that's not going to mean that all of my financial problems are going to go away just because I have a good work ethic. But I will make my financial issues worse if I refuse to work, right? And especially in their time period, if you refuse to work, good luck. Like you're going the begging route. Their government's not really giving the same benefits to those who don't work in the same way that maybe a modern government would, if that makes sense. Their government's a lot less generous, you could say, in that sense. So poor is the one who works with a negligent hand, even working, but working in a really lazy way. So like I can work, but not really be working. Right? I can work, but not really be putting much into it. Now, I'm a server, and as a server, most of our money, the overwhelming majority of our money comes from tips. So if I'm a lazy server and I'm not getting them refills, and I'm not caring for their needs, and I'm not pre-busting their tables, do you think that's going to affect my tips? Absolutely. Now, some people aren't going to tip you either way. Right? Some people aren't going to tip you if you give the best service in the world, but overall, I can improve how much money I make by working hard and by trying to do the best I possibly can with every table. So the person who works harder in that job for sure is going to make more than the person who doesn't work hard in that job for sure. And there's lots of different fields where this is obviously the case. The person who doesn't want to work, who doesn't want to advance, who doesn't want to improve, he's a lazy employee. Well, they may desire the comfy desk job, but they're not going to get the comfy desk job if they couldn't handle the lesser job, right? So the person who works hard is the one that's going to be promoted, all sorts of things like that. And again, these are general truisms. So Proverbs are general truisms, meaning it's not true 100% of the time, but it's true an overwhelming majority of the time. So most of the time, if you work really hard, that's going to improve your financial standing. And if you're lazy, that's going to hurt your financial standing. Are there lazy people who have won the lottery or just fallen into money? Sure. But those are the exceptions to the rule, not the rule itself, if that makes sense. Verse 5, he says, "He who gathers in summer is a son who acts wisely, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who acts shamefully." So Proverbs, or Solomon's not just saying that this affects you in a negative financial sense. It's actually an embarrassing thing, right? It's actually a shameful thing to be lazy, a shameful thing to be a worker who doesn't really work, or someone who's not really contributing, or someone that maybe a boss can't stand because they don't actually help out and do the things that they're supposed to do. What's that saying? It says you're like a blister, you show up when the work's all gone. Lazy employees and lazy coworkers, that makes it hard for everybody, right? I know there's people I work with, it's like when they're working, you're like, this is going to be a good shift because they're going to pull their weight and it's going to be good. We're all going to do our job. And then there's other people that you work with and you're like, this is going to be a hard shift because I have to do all of my stuff and all of their stuff. And it's really difficult to work with people like that. So there should be a sense in which we take pride in having a good work ethic and where we should be proud of the effort that we put in. And as Paul says, all of the work that we do, we should be doing it as if we're doing it for God himself, right? Like God is watching over the work that we're doing. Everything we put our hand to do, we should be doing it to the best of our abilities. Any comments or questions on verses 4 and 5? Yeah.
Probably a double thing, but I recently heard them saying that depending on what you're doing, if you give the hardest job you have to your laziest person, you figure out the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's something, right? Work smarter, not harder. Yep. All right. Verses 6 and 7. Blessings are on the head of the righteous, but the mouth of the wicked. Yeah, sorry, Tony, go ahead. No, you're good.
God punishes people sometimes. I guess frustrated for whatever reason God does it for. So sometimes somebody that does things the right way, sometimes, well, like
Oh, yeah, Joe.
So,
Yeah,
So, I'm just trying to make a point.
absolutely.
There's other reasons.
Oh, for sure. I'm glad you pointed that out, that, being in poverty or being on financial tough times is certainly not an indicator automatically, that you're lazy, especially when there's things like persecution. Jesus himself was very poor, and it wasn't his fault. It certainly wasn't a work ethic issue. He worked hard, but he was persecuted, and his followers were persecuted. And we'll talk about in the sermon later today, but with Christian persecution, it can be really, really hard to find work in certain countries and time periods. So yeah, there's other factors that definitely weigh in, which is why as we're reading Proverbs, we have to remember generally true, not always the case. It's just general rules for life, right? Okay. Verses 6 and 7. Blessings are on the head of the righteous, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. The memory of the righteous is blessed, but the name of the wicked will rot. We talk about blessings. Sometimes it's kind of one of those Bible words that we don't really talk about the definition of it very much, but it's a sign of approval. You could think of positive words, kind words, things like that. So on the head of the righteous, with righteous people, there's going to be blessings. There's going to be positive things said about them. But then the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. What does that mean, that the mouth of the wicked conceals violence?
They don't stand up to wickedness to let somebody else know about it, maybe?
Maybe, yeah. Absolutely. What else? How would a wicked person perhaps conceal violence? Yeah, for sure. Just cover it up and things like that. When a wicked person or an evil person comes and does something, they don't wear a shirt that says, like, I'm an evil person, right? And when somebody's going to hurt you or manipulate you, they don't say, hey, I'm here to hurt you and manipulate you, right? What do they say? I'm here to help. They present themselves as a friend. They present themselves as an ally. Someone's here to help you out. And sometimes that's the most dangerous place because it catches you off guard. And you think this person's here to help. You think they're kind. Even the people that are going to break into your house or rob you, they're not going to warn you in advance. It's hidden, right? So wicked people conceal their violence. They hide it because that's the best way for them to get away with it. If everybody knew their intentions, everybody would be wary of them, and everybody would kind of disguise it or be aware of them and call it out before it happens. There's also a sense in which I think we call things, by different names, and we hide things and hide our true intentions. And when we're kind of uncomfy about something that we do, we just call it a different name, right? We just call it a different name and kind of sugarcoat it and move it to a different category so it doesn't seem as bad. In verse 7, continuing that same thought, he says, the memory of the righteous is blessed, but the name of the wicked will rot. Who is somebody that you can think of that has passed away that just has a great reputation? And it just seems like every time their name comes up, it's just like positive thoughts. I think of like Steve Irwin, Bob Ross, Mr. Rogers from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I think Bob Ross is dead. I guess I shouldn't say it. I think he passed away. That's unfortunate if he's still alive. Not unfortunate if he's still alive. Unfortunate that I said that if he was still alive. It'd be great if he's still alive. There's certain people that just have positive, there's certain people that just have very positive lives. They do good things and people just think good about them. And the more and more time goes on, it seems like the more blessed, the more positive their memory is. Someone like Mother Teresa, you just think of her and you're like, oh wow, that's great. What a positive thing. On the flip side, people who do evil things, people who live their lives hurting people, what happens to their memory? It rots. It becomes almost like a bad word, like when you say someone's name, like Hitler, right? It's like his name has gotten, it's just like a synonym for evil now when you think of it, right? Just over time, it becomes worse and worse and worse. So not only does it affect, in verse 6, like blessings on the head of the righteous in this life, there's a lasting legacy that you leave of positive or negative, and people are going to talk about it. And the most important thing is what God thinks about it and the reputation that he thinks of those things, because his memory is going to be the memory that lasts forever. Okay, any comments or questions on those verses? All right, verse 8, he says, the wise of heart will receive commands, but a babbling fool will be ruined. Solomon has talked about this quite a bit, the importance of being teachable. And he says the wise person is going to receive commands. Somebody who's unwilling to receive commands, who's unwilling to be taught, are they going to learn very much? Absolutely not, right? If I'm too proud to ask questions, if I'm too proud to admit that I don't have the answers and seek the answers, I'm not going to get the answers, right? On the flip side, he says the babbling fool will be ruined. It's kind of interesting that he says babbling. If you're babbling, or what is babbling? Yeah, just saying words, right? Ashley gets mad when I say that. Sometimes when we're fake arguing, I'll say, you're just saying words. You know, y'all ever play Super Mario, or real arguing, Super Mario Brothers, Smash Bros. When you're fighting? I'm sure nobody knows the rules to that game. I think you just spam as many buttons as fast as you can, and that's like how you win, is just press them as fast as you can. Sometimes I think people are doing that when they're talking. They're just like, I'm just going to say as many words as I possibly can. It doesn't really make sense. It's just like, I'm just saying words. That's kind of what the fool does. He just says words, right? He's just babbling, right? He's just talking about things. And it's kind of the opposite of the wise person, because if you're talking, what are you not doing? Listening, right? I can't learn while I'm talking. The only way I can learn is if I'm listening. So if I spend all of my time talking, all of my time babbling, and never spend any time sitting and listening and asking questions, then all I'm going to know is the things that I already know. And I'm not going to increase in knowledge at all. So the wise person says, even if I have wisdom, I want to increase it. I want to learn more and more. And the only way I can do that is to sit and listen and hear what somebody else has to say. It's really dangerous when you have teachers who refuse to be taught. When you have people in positions where they're this person that's supposed to be teaching and giving wisdom, but they themselves refuse to teach. That's a really scary thing. And even Jesus, the best teacher that ever existed, obviously, in his life said, the things I'm teaching you are the things I learned from my Father. So he gives us like an example of, I learned these things and I share them with you. And that's the way it's supposed to be. None of us are creating new information. None of us are creating anything in and of ourselves. Everything we know, we learn from someone else. And the wise person, the foolish person gets to a point where they think, okay, now I have all the answers. Now I know everything and I don't need to listen to anyone else. But the wise person says, I don't have the answers. I want to continue learning and continue growing in wisdom. All right, verse 9. He says, he who walks in integrity walks securely, but he who perverts his ways will be found out. So the first part of it's pretty kind of self-explanatory. If you walk in integrity, you walk securely. Now, obviously, the security that Solomon's talking about does not mean that your life is going to be easy. Jesus, for example, sinless, perfect example of integrity. Was his life easy? Absolutely not. His life was extremely painful. His life was extremely chaotic, and people persecuted him because of his integrity. So in what sense was Jesus secure because of his integrity? Heaven, absolutely. Now, this might be a little shaky here and now, but he's got a permanent, fixed, eternal security, even if the immediate, situation that he's in is a little bit rocky. And the same is true for us. Just because you walk in integrity, and if you try to live a life of integrity, it may be difficult here and now, especially in the midst of an evil world, to live that way. And there might be problems here and now. There should be problems here and now. But you're secure in an eternal sense. On the flip side, he who perverts his ways, and perverts means to twist something, to use it for its not intended purpose, he who perverts his ways will be found out. And this is a promise. So a lot of times we look at the wicked people of the world, and David had this issue where he looked around the world, and he complains, I shouldn't say complains, he talks about this a lot in Psalms, and he says, why do the wicked prosper? And it's a really big issue for him, because he looks around the world, and he sees a ton of wicked people, a ton of people that reject God and are doing all sorts of evil things, prospering. And even as you look around the world, and you take like the wealthiest people in the world, or the people with the most political power, You might look at their lives and be like, why are they prospering so much? Why are they benefiting so much? Why do they live so securely while the best people I know seem to be struggling and certainly not as successful as they are? And it's a natural question to ask, but Solomon promises that they will be found out. Now, they may not be found out right now. They may not be found out 10 years from now. They may be found out on Judgment Day. But whether it's now or on Judgment Day, at some point in the future, those who pervert their ways will be found out. They're going to find out at some point. I know there's that saying that you can fool some people all the time and all people some of the time, but you can't fool all people all the time. Some people are going to get away with a lot of stuff, and they're going to get away with stuff for their whole life. But when Judgment Day is coming, no one gets away with anything. And no one's going to be able to trick God and pull one over on God and actually get away with evil. He's going to punish evil. He's going to reward righteousness. And choosing short-term success through a perverted path is not going to be good, in the long-term way of thinking. Verse 10, he says, "He who winks the eye causes trouble, and a babbling fool will be ruined." Again, the wink thing, we don't really know what it is. It's like a cultural thing. Winks mean different things, and even in American history, they mean different things at different times. But it seems that this is a signal that's deceitful. We talked about this in the previous chapters where he mentioned this, so I won't go over it too much. But it's a signal that's deceptive, right? So he who's doing this is causing trouble, and a babbling fool will be ruined. He's just saying these things lead to destruction. These things lead to negative places. If you're trying to deceive people, if you're refusing to learn, all these negative traits of the foolish person, they don't lead to a good place. They lead ultimately to ruin. Verse 11, "The mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life, but the mouth of the wicked," again, "conceals violence." In what sense could you say that the mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life? How is the mouth of the righteous a fountain of life?
Speaking the truth.
Speaking the truth? Absolutely. Making good decisions. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, it's pretty self-explanatory, I guess. Leads to life, right? You say things that lead to life. 12, "Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all transgressions." So it's kind of interesting. When we think of gossip, and we think of division, and we think of controversies, and even situations where people are fighting, what does Solomon say is the source of that? In verse 12, what stirs up strife? What stirs up conflict? What causes it? Hatred, right? Now, a lot of times when we get in those situations, whether we're gossiping about someone or we're really mad and arguing with someone, is our mindset, "I hate this person"? A lot of times, no, right? We're not at least consciously saying, "I hate this person and I want to talk about him," right? Sometimes maybe that is the case. Like we're really mad and we're saying those types of things. But that's not really a conscious thought that we have, I don't think, for the most part, that I hate someone and I want to stir up controversy about them. But Solomon says that is what causes it. And whether we acknowledge it or not, that is the cause of my gossip. That is the cause when I stir up controversy and stir up strife unnecessarily in those types of things. It's hatred. And ultimately, hatred is a lack of love for the other person. And then he says love covers all transgressions. And that makes sense because if I loved someone, genuinely loved them, and they did something that was embarrassing or they did something that was wrong, would I want other people to know about that? Not really, right? Jesus said to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If I did something that I didn't want people to know about, that I was embarrassed about, something that I did that I was ashamed of, I wouldn't want everybody talking about it. I wouldn't want everybody to know about it. I wouldn't want people, getting together and, hashing it out and talking about why I did the things I did and all that kind of stuff. That'd make me feel really bad. And if I genuinely love someone and I care about them, well, I don't want to do it to them what would hurt me, right? So whether it's a conscious thought or not, it's a lack of love that leads to gossip, that leads to this stirring up of controversy, the causing of strife and all that kind of stuff. And the solution to it is to genuinely love those people more and to consider how that would affect you and how that would make you feel if that situation was reversed on you as well. All of us have stuff, I'm convinced, that we don't want other people to know, right? And if I genuinely love someone at their lowest moments, I don't want everybody to know. I care about them, and I don't want to embarrass them, and I just want to make sure that they're okay, right? If somebody's doing something that you believe is going to lead them to hell, absolutely talk to them. Even if you're talking to someone, for example, we have interventions for people that are on drugs and things like that. If I care about my friend who's doing something really damaging, let's say it's drugs or something like that, I would go to them and talk to them, and I would plead with them personally and try to convince them not to do it. But if I didn't care about them, I would just talk to somebody else about it. Can you believe what he's doing? Can't believe John's doing that again. Isn't that crazy that he's doing that? And that's not motivated from love. That's actually motivated from hatred, because their struggles and their hard times is just a conversation point for me. And that's a very hateful thing. Even if I'm not thinking I'm being hateful, that is hateful. Whereas genuine love would be talking to them directly and trying to help them with whatever it is that they're going through. Verse 13, any comments or questions? Okay. Verse 13, on the lips of the discerning, wisdom is found, but a rod is for the back of him who lacks understanding. So the discerning person, on their lips you find wisdom, but a rod is for the back of him who lacks understanding. So it's kind of interesting, it's just discipline. Being foolish leads to pain, right? A rod is supposed to be a symbol of pain. It's something that hurts. It's a symbol of discipline. And being foolish, refusing to learn, refusing to increase in wisdom, ultimately leads to pain. If you think about the people that make the most foolish decisions, whether it's laziness or other things, so many times they unnecessarily create more pain for themselves and more work for themselves. A good example of this is the story of the prodigal son that Jesus tells. He has everything with his father. Life is good, but he gets his inheritance and he goes and squanders it all on trashy things, right? And where does he end up? Working with the pigs and wishing he had the food that the pigs had, right? Bad situation. Totally unnecessary. And he didn't realize this, but he didn't just hurt other people. He didn't just hurt his dad by what he was doing. He hurt himself. And he put himself in a really bad position. And he goes back to his father, and that's the great thing, is we can always return back to God and always return back to him and be forgiven, all that different stuff. But there's a lot of unnecessary pain that we cause ourselves that we don't have to cause ourselves and go through. And being foolish, it may give us an immediate temporary satisfaction, a temporary pleasure, but so many times the pain that comes because of foolishness lasts so much longer than the temporary joy that we receive because of it, right? Again, use these examples. Somebody might have a great time just really, really drinking a ton one night. What comes the next morning? They've got a killer hangover, right? And when they're dealing with their killer hangover, are they thinking about how fun last night was? It's like, no, my head's pounding, it hurts, I don't know why I did that. They're throwing up. And all that pleasure that they had in the moment isn't helping them now, right? The pleasure that you had in the moment doesn't help you now when you're suffering. Same thing, if you're married, you choose to go outside of your marriage and those other things, you might have that pleasure for a moment, but it's going to hurt, and the pain that causes is going to last so much longer than the temporary pleasure that you received. So many times the temporary things that we chase after hurt much longer and cause much more pain than the temporary things that we were chasing in the first place. Verses 14 through 17, he says, wise men store up knowledge, but with the mouth of the foolish, ruin is at hand. The rich man's wealth is his fortress. The ruin of the poor is their poverty. The wages of the righteous is life. The income of the wicked, punishment. He is on the path of life who heeds instruction, but he who ignores reproof goes away. Verse 15 is an interesting verse. He says, the rich man's wealth is his fortress. The ruin of the poor is their poverty. Is this saying that you can put your trust in riches? No. Why is it not saying that? Or if it's not saying that, what is it saying?
Riches can be more than money.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you can't really put a price tag on like a good marriage or kids that you love, right? There's not really a price tag that you can put on that. And I don't think anybody would really trade any amount of money for those things or the people that they love. Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. Can you be smart? I'll say this. He's certainly talking about riches in some senses, and he does throughout the book, in a positive sense. There's times in Proverbs, like now, when he talks about it in a positive sense, and there's times in which he talks about riches in a negative sense. And that is kind of a mixed view that you get through Scripture, that it's good to be financially secure. It's good, but there is temptation that comes with that as well. Later in Proverbs, Solomon says, give me neither poverty nor riches. So poverty, lest I forget you and steal, or lest I steal and profane your name, and don't give me riches, lest I forget you. And each of those different things comes with different temptations. There's temptations that you face when you're in poverty, and there's temptations that you face when you're in extreme wealth and things like that. And there are different temptations and different things you have to face. Can you be smart financially without making your life goal about money? Absolutely, right? And that's what Solomon wants, right? You should be smart, you should work hard, you should plan, you should do all those things, but it shouldn't be your goal in life, right? Because we're all going to die, and you can't take it with you. Ecclesiastes is a really good book about the fruitlessness of wealth because you can't take it with you when you go, right? So being smart and pursuing things in an intelligent way does not mean that you make that your whole life goal. Another good example of this is like, should we generally take care of our bodies? I think so, right? You can really hurt yourself. Shaking your head, no. Generally speaking, yeah, we should take care of our bodies because I don't want to spend the last 20 years bedridden, and all that kind of stuff, and your quality of life and all. I mean, it's really, some of the things are outside of our control, but the things I can control, I probably should, right? And it'll just make me happier, make my family happier, all that kind of stuff. But can I take care of my body in a reasonable sense without prioritizing my physical life on earth over my spiritual life? Sure. And that's what Paul says, that physical discipline is of some value, but spiritual discipline is of every value. So he's saying, look, taking care of your body is of some value. It's not a bad thing. It's just not the most important thing. And financial security is not a bad thing. It's just not the most important thing. The most important thing is your spiritual security, your relationship with God, because that's what affects your eternity. But you can still take care of the here and now as well. Any comments or questions on that section? No, okay. Verses 18 through 19, he says, he who conceals hatred has lying lips, and he who spreads slander is a fool. Where there are many words, transgression is unavoidable, but he who restrains his lips is wise. So he says that the person who conceals hatred has lying lips. If you conceal hatred, if you have hatred but you conceal it, you're a liar. But then he says, but if you spread slander, you're a fool. So if I hate someone and I conceal it, I'm a liar. But if I hate someone and I start telling people I spread about it, I'm a fool. Well, what's the solution? What was that? Yeah. What was that?
Love more.
Yeah, love more, right? If I can't have hatred in my heart because I'm a liar, and I can't spread hatred to everyone else because I'm a fool, then I just shouldn't have hatred at all, right? The solution is, so many times people, what's the saying? If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And a lot of people think that's fine. As long as I don't say it, it's fine. But Solomon's like, look, if you're hating them and you're playing nice, you're a liar, right? Like you're just pretending. And that's not good enough, especially when it comes to God. Jesus says, you've heard that it was said, thou shalt not commit murder, but I tell you, whoever hates his brother has already committed murder in his heart. So Jesus wants to go past just your physical actions and past just your physical words to what's actually in your heart. And the same is true here. He's kind of created this impossible situation saying, whether you speak the hatred or you just think the hatred, either way, you're in a bad situation. So the only solution is just to get rid of the hatred, right? Stop being hateful. Just get rid of it entirely. He says, where there are many words, transgression, sin is what? Unavoidable. He doesn't say where there are many words, transgression is likely. Yeah, right. He doesn't say with many words transgression is probable or possible, right? He says it's unavoidable, right? The more you speak, the more you open yourself up for an opportunity to sin. It's one of the reasons that James says, let not many of you become teachers, because as such, you'll incur stricter judgment, right? It's one of the scariest things about this job and just about teaching in general is that I'm judged for everything I say. So everything I teach, everything I preach, I'm judged for those things. I can't look to God and be like, yeah, sorry, I was really wrong about all that and I misled people, but I was just doing my job, like let's separate my performance as a teacher from me. I'm going to be judged for all of it. And that's one of the scariest things about it. And the more we talk, the more we're bound to slip up and say something that we shouldn't say, right? So again, same thing that James says, same thing that Jesus says, be slow to speak and quick to listen, right? Doesn't mean don't ever talk to people, right? Jesus certainly talked to people, he had relationships with people, but to take the time to listen and think about the things that you're saying, right? Sometimes, if you just stop for a second and think about whether the thing that you're going to say is going to be beneficial, you might be like, okay, I really wouldn't say that. There's lots of jokes that I've made that I'm like, if I could go back in time, be like, it didn't benefit anything, right? And it was hurtful, and maybe I laughed and someone else laughed, but it wasn't worth it, right? Because it's hurtful and all that kind of stuff. So the more we talk, the more chance we open ourselves up to sin and all of that kind of stuff. So restraining our lips is a wise thing to do. How can you practically, what's a way that you can actually restrain your lips? Like what could you do to actually consciously control your speech more? What was that? You say tape? Yeah, just tape your mouth.
Well, it's got a lot to do with your thoughts, what you say. Control your thoughts, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm with you. Right. 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 Absolutely. I don't think it helps, when we look at debates and the way that things are done today, nobody's listening to anybody. It's like point scoring. Whether you turn on the presidential debates and all that kind of stuff, just politicians, it's like we're just trying to score points and insult each other and get the zingers and the burns, And sometimes that form of argument that we see that's so popular and gets lots of views on YouTube and stuff, sometimes that can affect the way that we think about how conversations are supposed to go. And sometimes when I'm in conversations, especially when people I disagree with, I'm trying to win instead of learn. And I'm trying to conquer them, in some sense, and own them, and that kind of stuff. And that's not going to lead to actual knowledge. That's not going to lead to actual productive activities. As you watch those debates, nobody ever stops and says, you know what? You raised some really solid points and I changed my mind, you're right. It never happens because that's not what the conversation is aimed towards. But for the wise person, that is what our conversation should be aimed towards. We should be aimed towards, how can I actually be right, not just look like I'm right to everyone else? How can I actually increase in the things that are true? What were you saying, Tony?
Running my mouth. I was just thinking I was just going to be a wise guy and say that John Kennedy in the Congress really seems to get them all stopped, when he says stuff. He just kind of, he can make them look like fools, really.
Right. Yeah. Verses 20 through 21, these will be the last two that we look at, then we'll stop. He says, the tongue of the righteous is as choice silver. The heart of the wicked is worth little. The lips of the righteous feed many, but fools die for lack of understanding. He says the tongue of the righteous is as choice silver. It's interesting, choice silver, something is more valuable the more rare it is, right? So it's kind of one of those things where you ever know somebody that doesn't really say much, but when they say something, And when they speak up, it seems to always be valuable. That's what the righteous person's like, right? Like they're not just constantly babbling for no reason, just saying words. They're actually thinking and providing useful things to the conversation. And when they talk, it's like everybody listens because that's something that's actually important. He says, but the heart of the wicked is worth little, right? So what they think about the situation, what's in their heart, not worth much. Why? Because they're not listening to anybody, and they're just kind of always yapping and always talking. So who cares, right? They're always talking. Like it's not valuable to anyone. And then in verse 21, he says, the lips of the righteous feed many. So the righteous people are feeding people with the wisdom that they have. They're like helping and providing. But fools die for lack of understanding. If the lips of the righteous are feeding everybody and giving wisdom that's like great, that's feeding everyone, why are the wicked dying for lack of understanding? If the righteous are feeding freely with their lips, why are the wicked dying for lack of understanding?
They're shutting it out.
Yeah, they're shutting it out. They don't want to hear it, right? Even though it's freely offered to them, even it's something that's being offered and given to them and all those things, they've rejected it. So they die for lack of understanding, not because they weren't offered wisdom, but because they rejected it. And that goes back to the way that Solomon described wisdom as the woman who's shouting on the streets, begging for people to pay attention and listen, but people turn a deaf ear and they keep walking and they don't want to hear it. It's kind of like that thing, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? A foolish person isn't going to learn against their will. You can't make anyone learn something against their will. The best you can do is share the truth with them and hope that they're receptive, but you can't learn something for somebody. Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't feel good in the moment sometimes, right?
I believe they like to use that word, constructive criticism. They're just focusing on the criticism. There's 1,000 ways to do it without having to be critical of somebody. You can teach a better way. You can perform facts. I think telling somebody off is constructive.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more disruptive than it is constructive. Like, whoever put those two words together, you
Yeah.
can't be constructive and critical at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it depends on what you mean by it for sure, yeah. But
Yeah.
some people say constructive criticism and they're just using it as a reason to just kind of tear into you. And then other people are really helpful. You know, they're like, even in sports, you know, it's like, well, this is what's wrong with your golf swing. This is how you can fix it. And sometimes that second part of this is how you can fix it isn't there.
Well,
And it's just, you're terrible.
have you ever tried this?
Yeah.
And you're doing it wrong, and this is
Right.
doing it right.
Right.
I think I just think that, my wife, I told her one time, she said, I married you because I thought I was the best you could get. And she's not even as a compliment, I'm like a backhanded compliment.
You're like, I don't think that's a compliment. Right.
Come out, you know?
Right.
But that, I think sometimes we just need to think about what we're about to say.
Right.
And think about how we're going to say it, and not be so, I don't know, just make sure that it's seasoned with grace.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's kind of like we were talking about last week, and even Philippians is a good example of this, but compliment sandwiches, as they say. Start off with something nice. This is what we got to work on. And then just end with something nice, too. Just like you said, cover it in nice things. Yeah, because you can say the right thing in the wrong way. And sometimes we're a jerk to people, and we're really rude. And then when they're not receptive, we're like, see, the fool hates instruction. It's like, no, you were just mean. Like, you know, if you were nice, they would have been receptive, but you were just mean about it. So, yeah, absolutely. All right, we'll pick up next week there. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.